Hey everyone, hope you're having a great week and welcome to another Bona Training Camp video. Today we're going to talk about usage of the power drive in your business, how you can best utilize it to create great floors every time. And look, since it came out in 2014, the power drive's been an absolute game changer to how professionals approach sanding their floors and the surfaces you're creating. In fact, it's probably the best machine innovation in our industry since the 1940s, after World War II, when they introduced drum machines, eventually led to belt sanders and then to edgers to replace hand scraping floors. But since then, there's really been a true void in our industry as far as innovation on the machinery side, except maybe for the 90s when we introduced dust containment systems, which were a game changer themselves. But the power drive came along and completely changed the way guys looked at sanding versus the old school method of sander, edge, sander, edge, sander, edge, screen. Now a lot of guys, if they're not using power drive all the way through their system, maybe they're starting out with their belt sander and then going straight to power drive to help reduce their edging by 50 to 80%, using it for all the intermediate and fine sanding and even in between coats when they're going sealer, finish, etc. One of the big things with the power drive is it has an incredibly low learning curve. And that means I can take a new guy, somebody who has no experience in the business, maybe put 10, 15 minutes training with them and then turn them loose, knowing that they're going to get professional results on about 99% of that floor. I don't have to worry about drum marks, edger digs in the corners. I'll be able to set them free, and that just increases my productivity and that confidence of putting the new guy on a machine. Also, we like to talk about it being all directional, and really there's best ways to run it, right? Certain directions you should run it, certain positions on the machine. But what we mean by all directional is if you get in a tough situation, maybe it's a storage closet underneath the stairway that's pretty tight. It's a hallway that's laid crossways that you have two choices. I can lightly run my sander across it and create all kinds of crazy cross-grain scratches, or I can edge out that whole floor. Not great options. With the power drive, I can go in and sand that floor back and forth. I could go straight up and down with it. And I'm just not worried about putting those crazy cross-grain scratches that I would with a belt sander. Behind a kitchen island on one side, it's always going to be short where you can't really fit your sander in there, maybe under pantry shelves, things like that. So that's kind of what we mean by all directional is places that you couldn't put a sanding machine because it's either too tight or you'd be running straight across the grain with it. You can go ahead and sand it with the power drive and not have to worry about a bunch of extra work to get crazy scratches out. And we never want to say scratch free because we actually need scratches in the floor. But we don't want those to be discernible to the eye, definitely not to ours or to our customers. So we like to say this creates the optimal scratch pattern because you need scratches in the floor for proper surface tension when you're putting on, whether it's stain, but really sealers, finishes, paint, and we need it to be open, especially if we're adding colorants to the floor. So it's not scratch free, but it's putting that optimal scratch pattern in the floor that we can count on with the Bona Power Drive. So with all that, let's go ahead and take a look at how we can best utilize the Bona Power Drive to help create beautiful floors every time. All right, so the first thing we need to do to run our power drive effectively is make sure we have adequate power. As you can see, being a commercial location, we're only pulling from a 208 panel in here. So having our booster, we want to boost this up as much as we can. And always check the spec placard on your machine. Again, a lot of the early power drives were wound for 220. Probably a couple years after we came out from them, we started winding them to 240. So we want to run as close to what our placard says as possible if we can't get exactly there. But this is fine. If we run at 233, you've got plus or minus 10% that you can run machines on, and you should be good to go. So we want to run on proper power. And if you're not, you've got this overload switch right here that may pop on you. Again, we've run into more issues with guys having too much voltage coming in, but that's also where the booster would come in handy, because you can dial it down as well as dial it up. And you'd always want to check that on your multimeter on your machine to truly see what you've got coming in right here at the plug. Your multimeter will tell you that. If you've got too much or too little and you're creating too much resistance, too much heat inside, there is an internal thermal breaker that'll pop, as well as this overload switch that's a manual reset. If that happens, give it 15 to 20 minutes to cool down. Then you should be able to hit this manual reset and it'll stay pushed in. Then you're good to start your machine up again. But first I would go back and check my cables, any of my plugs, double check what you've got coming out of the wall, see what you've got coming in right at the machine if your thermal overload pops at all, okay? And then once we've got proper power, and I'm just gonna unhook this for safety. We're gonna kick our machine back on the kickstand, and we're gonna go ahead and install our power drive plate. And with this, we just wanna make sure when we put it on and rotate it, that we're rotating it all the way and fully engaging that. I don't wanna partially engage it and then do what we call slam fit it when I turn the machine on. It will tend to wallow out your clutch plate, and then you'll get a lot of bouncing and stuff in your machine. And then we're gonna run steel plates, even though this is gonna be my first cut on this floor. A lot of times guys love the steel plates. They keep everything nice and flat. They will definitely tell you when you've got situations like this where I've got chatter. Now this is not chatter from a sanding machine, but actually chatter from the production process, from the planing process at the manufacturer. So I'm gonna use that flat plate to make sure I get all of the chatter out of the floor. But we'll also utilize the 1/4 inch intermediate pads with the steel plates. And there's a good reason for that. You could just go straight steel plates, but we always wanna use the steel plate and the intermediate pad, and then our abrasives straight on that. Because what this does is the steel plate keeps everything super nice and flat, and you want your abrasive right on that. But then it gives you a little cushion, so you've got a little bit of this floating system. Because if it's just super stiff, definitely when I'm doing a brand new install, if I have any high spots, low spots, it's gonna wanna climb up on those high spots, and it's gonna jump around quite a lot. So if I use the intermediate pads in conjunction with the steel plates, it's just gonna help everything stay a lot smoother while still getting the floor super flat, but not cause that jumping, or really help decrease any jumping I'm getting from high spots. So I've got 1/4 inch intermediate pad, then I've got 40 grit green that we'll start out here with, is one of our ceramic hybrid products. And I'm starting out with green because I want to be, more aggressive on my first cut. Some guys will stay with green throughout, but then I've got options down the road that we can talk about as far as our abrasives. So once I've got my abrasives loaded, then I can try to figure out my weights situation. Again, being that this is the first cut, I definitely want to use at least one weight, maybe two, because this is a brand new install, and I noticed I've got, some places where I've got a decent amount of over-under wood. I'm gonna put both weights on to start, see how that's going, and then I can adjust and just do one if I want to from there. And again, you want to lock these down with the wing screws so that it doesn't bounce around a lot if you do hit some of those spots. All right, so once we've got our abrasives on, we've got our weights loaded on there, now we can go ahead and turn our power back on, grab our hose for our dust containment. And with any of your dust containment, whether it's on the power drive or any of your other machines, always make sure that you've got a positive locking system. I love these cuff clamps. They're heavy duty. I know it's not coming off of there. And then the position of our hose and our cable. I like them coming up straight over the top. I feel just I can keep better control of them that way. Some guys will let the power cord, dangle more near the floor, but I like having them both on top. And in fact, we'll always go the extra step further of taking some Velcro strips and Velcroing these together. It just helps keep them together and then keeps them more out of your way as you're using it. So 4 or 5 of these on down the line is just a good way to stay more organized and stay a little cleaner and keep these 2 pieces of accessories, the cable and the hose, out of your way while you're working. And then we've got position of the handle. So for starting, if I turn it to the side here, again, to start this up, there's a safety mechanism down in the bottom of the base that in its upright position does not let me start the machine. So I've got to get it at about 10%. And sometimes you'll move it back and you'll find it didn't start. So you move it back just a little more until you find a place that it starts. Let that magnetic slide or safety catch release, and now you can start. And that's just to keep you from accidentally starting it in the upright position, where depending on what plate you've got in the bottom, if you do that, these things may swing all the way around and hit you in the ribs, which is not a good experience. So get it tilted back to the right position where it starts up, and you'll be ready to go. After that, we can talk about, again, running position. When I'm running it up and down the floor, what way am I going? How do I have the chassis positioned? And basically, when we're running it up and down the floor, we want to run it just like this, which we'll call perpendicular to my path. So, and that's because if you think about the weight of this machine and how it's distributed, even though now I have weights on it, the main cutting, even though it's cutting in a circle, it's feathering in the front and cutting more in the back. Probably from about 5 to 7 o'clock is my heavier cut, and it's feathering on the front. So we will always start at the wall, and we'll go up and back, again perpendicular this way and back in the same path. Then we'll move down about half the width of my drive plate, down and back in the same path. So again, we're cutting in the back and feathering in the front, and we're moving away from the wall. So I'm cutting and feathering as I'm moving back. That's position 1. Position 2, if you need to be a little bit more aggressive, because we know we're cutting heavier between 5 and 7, I just want to get that cut point a little more so it's moving more across the grain than with it the whole time. That'll give me a little heavier cut. So in this instance, my path would be to start at my wall down here and move down the wall in this position, but then I'm going to straighten it back out and be in my perpendicular position so that I'm feathering as I'm coming back. If you get into a real nasty floor where you're really having to be what you feel is more aggressive, especially again, maybe like this on the first cut, then you could go with that more aggressive angle both ways up and down the floor. So I've got it turned like this as I'm moving right to left. And then when I come back, I've got it this way, again, moving that cut point up and around a little bit so that it's cutting heavier, across the grain, which will just give me a more aggressive cut. Now, if you do that, we would definitely recommend on your successive cuts that you do the perpendicular method, just to make sure you're cutting, feathering, and not cutting, as this method would do. And the last one, position is called the lawnmower. And that's if I've got it in this position. So my heavy cut is all the way in the back. I'm feathering in the front. And so I'm going to move, again, from the wall towards my backside all the way down. And then I'm going to move in the same path backwards. So in essence, the theory is, as I'm going this way, I'm cutting heavier because I'm pushing against the machine to move it down the floor. My cutting is in the back. And then as I'm coming back this way, my feathering side is in the front and I should be feathering the whole way back. And again, if you have to do that method, the lawnmower method, any of your subsequent cuts, we'd recommend moving back to the perpendicular method to make sure you're getting that good cutting and feathering as you're moving across your floor. So those are the 4 different positions and angles and directions that we'll kind of move with this machine as we're generally working a floor. But remember, we talked about this being all directional. So if I come across a floor that I have to go 45 degrees across the floor, or I've got to go, again, completely up and down or across, like my hallway is laid across, I can go straight up and down that floor, although I would generally work that in the perpendicular method anyway. But just know you can go any direction with this and not worry about putting the crazy cross-grained scratches in it like you would with a belt sander or edger or any other machine other than the Bona Power Drive. So then we've done our main field, and now we want to talk about, well, how do I reduce my edging 50 to 80%? So, when you've got a belt sander out, your heavy edging areas are always going to be in your cross corners where the sander, because of the way the belts, the drive belts are located on that, you've always got probably a space of about 3 feet by about 1.5 feet that you can't sand because your machine won't reach it. And then of course on your butt ends where the front of the machine is trying to get as close to the wall as possible, you've usually got anywhere from 6 to 8 inches on your butt ends that you would have to edge as well. So even if I have to break out my sander and hit the floor first with that, then I'm immediately breaking out my power drive, I'm hitting those opposite corners, and then I'm going to hit my butt ends and even along the open walls too. And what I want to try to do there is I will try to turn the machine as I'm running it and get my cut point in the back. If I pretend this is my wall, get my cut point as close to the wall as possible. And I'll gently move down. If this is my open wall, I'll gently go down the wall like that, keeping an eye on how close I'm getting. And you can push your dust skirt and stuff as close to your baseboard as you need to, right up against it. It's got a nice glide strip, so it tends to move up and down the baseboards nicely. And that's kind of how I'll gauge my open walls. And then I want to use the same method when I'm on the butt ends of the floor. But also there, because you've got more to edge and you may be trying to work that a little more, don't run this machine straight up and down the edges on your butt ends of the floor, because you may also wear a path because you're going cross grain. You don't want to wear a back path from the back of this machine into the floor. So just like we would with an edger, when I'm on the butt ends, you'll see that, yes, I'm turning the machine to get as close to the wall as possible, but I'm also using a bit of a feathering motion going in and out in the same direction as the floor, so that I'm not going straight across that grain, possibly risking, again, putting a path straight across there that is probably going to be really tough to see until you put stain or sealer or finish on it, and then of course we're too late. Or I'm done with my power drive plate, and maybe you run the power drive plate all the way through. There's plenty of guys who do that. But if I want to go ahead then and put on, say, my multi-disc or just a straight 16-inch drive plate, and or maybe I'm moving to my Tampico brush, those are all going to fit onto our machine more like any other standard drive plate and be used in the buffer position. So I'm going to put on my multi-disc, and it will not engage with the spur gear, but so I don't have to take that off. The riser height we have on there is plenty, so we're not worried about any height considerations there. Again, I'm going to leave my hose and cable in that same position up over the top, but now my handle position is going to change. So again, because we've got a regular drive plate on there and no longer the power drive plate, I can't leave this handle in this upright position. If I turn it on from here, again, my handle's probably going to come around and hit me in the ribs. So now I want to lower the handle to that hip level, and this is where then it's going to pull to one side or the other, right? If I Just let it go naturally. It wants to come to the right. If I push down a little bit on the handle, usually on this side, it's going to come to the left. And we also have to make a decision then about weights. Usually when we get to this point, maybe if I'm going on a cut straight after I've gone with Bona green, then I may want to leave one weight on. But a lot of the times when we get to the multi-disc stage, my floor is already nice and flat and pretty smooth. I don't need any weights, so most likely I will take them off. And now our footprint also changes. You know, the place that the machine is cutting, because of the natural tendency or the way it rotates, now my cut really is more between like 3 and 5, so it moves up around this side of the machine, but still pretty heavy on this, say, 430 side. So with that, then I can also put, you know, a hip into this if I need to do a little extra grinding. But then my position will also change as I'm moving this machine more like a regular buffer. So a lot of guys will move it up and down the floor. Again, maybe this way, they'll clock it a little bit. So now my cut point is going straight across the grain. And when they're coming back, now I've moved that cut point so it's in line with the grain and I'm doing my feathering. So know that I've moved from the power drive, kind of non-directional cut, to a rotary drive, which definitely has a directional cut. And I've got to really know where my cut point is now and where to put my scratches in and where to take my scratches out. All right, so that's running the power drive, both with the power drive plate and then with your standard buffer type plates that would be my multi-disc, my Tampico brush, and or just the regular 16-inch Aplix driver plate. So as you can see, the Bona Power Drive is a very easy machine to operate, even with all the different options we've got with it, with the different drive plates, all the abrasive options, running it as the power drive, running it as a regular buffer style machine. As long as you make sure you've got adequate power, understand your abrasive options with steel plates and intermediate pads and how those help each other out, as well as the operating positions, and keep the Bona commandment of feather, feather, feather in mind, because there are ways, again, that we showed. We can make this cut heavier or feather more. And depending on the angle and direction that we're going with the machine, we can make it more aggressive with the weights. We can pull that cut point up around the sides a bit. And keep those things in mind, and you'll be on your way to creating beautifully flat floors every time, every day with your Bona Power Drive.